This is Big Ideas from the ABC.
Hi, I'm another student, I'm afraid. My question is to
your
the
name,
Ambassador. You mentioned that the real threats Australia faces today are from criminal organizations and cybersecurity threats. And you also mentioned that the US does a fine job of protecting itself and its allies against such threats. My question is, what evidence is there, not just that they do a good job, but that they would do a better job than, say, China?
Than China?
Or similar allies in the region,
Okay.
because that's the debate.
Okay, so the question there, why wouldn't we back China and its capacity in cyber security and cyber war rather than America? But don't answer yet. Microphone 2.
Yeah, Peter Simmons from the World Socialist website. I'll just make a point first. In the name of defence, governments go to war, and in the case of the United States over the last decade, that's been proven many times. If we're going to put, I think we should put the US and the Obama administration on trial. You know, they've been conducting criminal wars in Iraq, in Afghanistan, regime change in Libya and Syria, and as far as cyberspace is concerned and cyber operations are concerned, what has been revealed...
Thank you.
What has been revealed...
Sorry, he has a minute, so please let him finish.
What has been revealed by Edward Snowden is the greatest cyber criminal on the face of the planet is the Obama administration. I would just pose one question, and that's in relationship to the build-up which has been taking place throughout the region. By 2020, 60% of US naval forces are going to be in the Pacific. By 2020, 60% of air forces, as well as all the bases that have been alluded to, are going to be in the Pacific.
Question.
This is not about terrorism. This is not about humanitarian operations. This is about
your time is
encircling
finished.
China.
Thank you. And that was, I'll take that as a statement which invites a response in due course.
I draw your attention to the fact that during Kevin Rudd's first term as Prime Minister, President Obama twice cancelled visits to Australia, only making a visit after Rudd had been removed. It is now known at that time that the United States was hostile to Rudd's concept of an Asia-Pacific community in which the United States would have to make some accommodation to China's aspirations for greater influence in the region in order to try to head off a situation analogous to that which developed between Britain and Germany prior to World War I. And Henry Kissinger and Zbigniew Brzezinski, both of whom, of course, you know, refer to the China-US situation in that context. Following Rudd's removal by Labor factional bosses, some of whom were described in official cables made available by WikiLeaks as protected sources of the US Embassy, Obama then did come to Australia. He took the unprecedented decision to unveil a major shift in US foreign policy, the pivot to Asia, not from the Rose Garden at the White House or in an address to the US Congress, but in a speech delivered from the floor of the Australian Parliament.
Okay.
It's very clear that the pivot is
That's
directed...
your time. That's your time up?
Just let me finish.
Well, no, you get a minute.
Is directed against China, and given the proclivity for, and endangers the population of Australia and the world with war, given the proclivity of the US...
Well done, thank you. Yeah.
That the US Embassy had nothing to do...
Okay, you've had your minute. It's an important thing about this House, and I'm going to let you respond immediately to that, is that the audience is rather intolerant of people who take more than their time, whether they're here or there. Ambassador Bleich, you might want to respond to that part of the question.
Well, can I respond to both
yeah,
Rich's
okay,
questions?
Yeah.
So Rich, first on the issue of Pentagon's got a plan to contain China. We don't. And I don't know where you're getting your information from, but that's not America's approach. And if you just look at what we're doing in the region, it's not about that at all. Secondly, if you want to look at the what you described as war games that we do in the region, I'd ask you to look at precisely what the most recent exercise was here. Our exercises involved things like humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. It had to do with breaking up a strife in a particular region where you have a scarcity, shortage, and people are raiding to try and get those resources. Precisely the sorts of things that I was describing. And working together to make sure that our cyber security systems are secure and that we can communicate with each other, notwithstanding hacking attempts or attempts to exploit weaknesses in cyber. So it's precisely the sort of things that I said we were doing, and if you just look at what we actually do in the world as opposed to what people like to suspect we're doing, what you'd find is that we're actually being entirely true to our word. Now, with respect to the statement that the President of the United States cleverly arranged for the Senate to hold off to the very last minute any vote on health care so that he wouldn't be able to come out here and visit with Prime Minister
That's real
Rudd.
power, isn't it?
Yeah, and then later on, he brilliantly ensured that you would have the Deepwater Horizon oil spill with the images of oil coming up every single day so that he wouldn't have to fly here to visit with Prime Minister Rudd. You know, it's not true. The president was anxious to get out here. It was one of the first visits that he scheduled. He had 2 reasons why he couldn't come out. That came up at the last minute. Literally, I got the call the night that he was supposed to be flying out, saying, I just can't leave because of the Deepwater Horizon spill. In terms of during his first term, Prime Minister Rudd's agenda on the Asia-Pacific community, we supported that. We thought it was a great idea, and we have supported the East Asia Summit. We have joined we signed the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation for ASEAN. We have gotten involved in the East Asia Summit so that all the parties in the region would be in one organization together and we could work through any dispute, whether it was an economic one or a security dispute, together. So that's the, you know, that is the truth. Those are the facts.
Good evening. My name's Peter Grulemans. I'm a member of the Support Assange and WikiLeaks coalition. Ambassador Bleich said that no 2 nations are better at combating corruption than Australia and America. How can that be true when we look at the war that was waged in Iraq on false pretenses, which roots back to the 9/11 catastrophe? And if Australians and Americans were to question, to dare to question the authenticity of the reports of what happened in 9/11, we would be silenced or ridiculed. How can you say that the American government is not corrupt if it has waged this war? And most Americans I meet, I went on a cruise last year and I asked them, have you heard about the 3rd building that collapsed at 9/11? And most of them haven't heard about it.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to I'll jump the order because I think you should be given a right immediately to respond to that. So then we'll come back to you, Jim.
Yeah, no, you know, first, I don't think that releases of classified information are good at eliminating corruption. In fact, they do just the opposite. So let me give you an example. Muammar Gaddafi. Well, you said the U.S. is corrupt, and yeah, so Muammar Gaddafi was clearly a corrupt leader and was doing terrible things to his own people. We were working on that. Because of WikiLeaks releases, that information was made public. We lost our ambassador there. We lost a number of other key insights, and we weren't able to have our full strength at the time that Libya started to fall. You know, this is not something that helps you address corruption. It's something that limits your ability to address corruption, to share that sort of information. With respect to the question about the facts relating to 9/11 and whether or not the U.S. has somehow suppressed that information, the U.S. had a broad commission which did an in-depth investigation. It was shared in by people from numerous nations. We have published fully the 9/11 report. We also have the eyewitness accounts of thousands of people, and so the notion that somehow the U.S. has managed to cover this up is along the lines of saying that the U.S. has somehow faked the moon landing and some of these other conspiracy theories, which over the years have always been discredited.
Can I just suggest, in terms of your questions and comments, really the debate was not to put the US on trial tonight for every imperfection. It's around the topic, is the alliance the best defence? And we'll come.
We're invited by Mr. Ambassador to judge the US on what it does. Jim gave us a quick rundown of what's been involved in the last 50 years. President Carter says that the US has been involved in over 140 instances of destabilising or destroying legitimate government. So my question is, nobody has told us where any of these threats are coming from. Everybody's skirting around. But the US is clearly in decline. It's clearly not the power it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. So why would we hitch our security on a declining power?
Yeah, well, I might just break, because that is a question we were talking about before. I mean, you're in so much debt. You've got energy self-sufficiency coming. Why would the US be relied on to come when it's needed?
Okay, well, first I'll address the issue of U.S. decline, because we've heard this before. We heard this at the start of the Cold War. The story was that Russia's centralized economy was going to overwhelm the U.S. economy. It could never keep up. And in fact, John F. Kennedy, if you listen to the tape recordings, that was the advice he was getting from his advisors. And that proved not to be the case. And then after the Cold War, everyone said the Cold War's over and Germany and Japan have won, and the U.S. has spent its load and it can't keep up. And again, that proved to be wrong. After the global financial crisis, again, the statement was that the U.S., it's in irons, it's a lagging economy, it won't come back. In fact, if you just look at the U.S. economy, 4 years ago, the Dow Jones was at 6,500. Today, it's at over 15,000. If you look at the U.S. economy, every month for the past 36 months, unemployment has been falling and growth has been rising. If you look at any one of the metrics, we have completely reinvented our economy. We've changed our whole energy mix. So now we have the cheapest gas in the world, and it has created over 500,000 new manufacturing jobs in the U.S. and really built up the U.S. economy. And at the same time, we've reduced our carbon footprint more than any other nation in the world. We are one of the most resilient economies in the world. People move when they need to in order to get jobs. Money flows freely around the United States, and capital finds its most productive purpose. And that's why places like Silicon Valley and all of the things that we take for granted in our lives, the Google and the Facebook and the iPads and those are all coming out of the United States because of the nature of our economy. So I'm not prepared to say that the U.S. is dead or the U.S. is in decline. I think the evidence once again is pointing in just the opposite direction.
Okay, we have to be brief, Jeff, because we get some other people in too. Just a very brief final point.
Oh, yes, and then on the other point about running around destabilizing legitimate governments, and that it's 100 and something, that's just not true. And I would defy someone to give me that list. And let me just point about where we've done military actions. Usually they are part of peacekeeping forces. I don't think anyone is saying that we destabilized a legitimate government when we went in to save lives in the former Yugoslavia. I don't think anyone is saying that we were involved in destabilizing a legitimate government when we went into Somalia, or when we tried to save lives in Rwanda. When these efforts come up, when innocent people are dying, everyone turns to the United States and says, thank goodness you have the forces that you have to save innocent lives and innocent civilians.
Okay, thank you.
I'm a student at the University of Sydney, and my question is for the Major General. I understood and think the argument regarding free riding is compelling, that if against the conventional military threat of, say, invasion, that the United States might not come to our defense. So my question is threefold. Firstly, do we actually face any conventional military threats like Imperial Japan in the 1930s? If we do, who are they from? And does the free riding argument actually work against the asymmetrical threats that Australia faces in the modern world, like with respect to failed states, terrorism, international crime networks, maritime security? So with respect to everything that Catherine told us about what the United States is doing for us in combating those threats, can we objectively rely on the United States, considering how much help they've been to us with respect to actual realistic threats in the modern day?
My name's Niamh O'Connor. I just wanted to raise kind of something that I think that hasn't really been addressed so far. I think a big problem that Australia should consider if it is going to rely on the US for its defence is that the US does not really act outside of its own interests. So if Australia is going to rely on the US for its defence, it needs to think about whether it's happy to turn to the US and possibly be told, okay, this war isn't in our own interest. Like, Ambassador, you raised the issue of Somalia and Rwanda earlier, and if you just think about, you know, America's reluctance to intervene in Rwanda after the disaster in Somalia, you can kind of maybe, you know, think about what could happen with Australia if something happens here that's not in US interest.
Thank you.
My name is Donna McIntosh. I think that history should have taught us that great powers will always work in their own best interests, and therefore we can't depend on America or China or anybody working in our best interest. We need to depend on ourselves. I'm with General Molan on this one. We need to think about what our moral issues are, where we want to go, and not make formal alliances with anyone.
Thank you.
So my name is Timothy Simic. I'm year 11 from school. I was just asking, with what you're proposing, wanted to clarify, is it really an alliance, or is it more of a factor of reliance? And how would you define the difference between an alliance and a reliance, and what kind of strategies would you have in place to prevent it from turning into reliance?
Okay, is it alliance or reliance? And how appropriate that the final question from the floor will come from a woman at microphone 2. Your name, please.
My name's Sue Wadley. What I wanted to know is, doesn't a US alliance for Australia mean more friends for the US and more enemies for Australia? Don't America's enemies become our enemies?
Okay, thank you. Microphone 2.
Hi, I'm a student from Penrith High, and I would like to know, if we as Australia are free riding on America, what is America seeking to gain from our alliance? And a question somebody else wanted to ask is, why are American submarines being allowed to patrol Australia? Or something along the lines of...
Why are there Marines here? No, hold off, because we're going to get a couple more. So you can hold this, you're a general, you know, you're holding them. Microphone 2. I'm going to do a little bit of affirmative action. If you're a woman in the audience and you'd like to contribute to this debate, because I think every speaker so far has been a bloke, I'm going to go to you first, and if you're feeling like you want to jump in, we're going to try a bit of gender balance. So there is a woman up at microphone 4, so you're the next cab off the rank. Yes, please come forward. Your name?
Hi, Kate from UTS. My question is, if we are to be more self-reliant with Australia's security, how well are we utilising the bilingual and multilingual talent within our society? And if we aren't utilising them well, how can we do that better?
Thank you. Microphone 3.
My name's Neve O'Connor. I just wanted to raise kind of something that I think that hasn't really been addressed so far. I think a big problem that Australia should consider if it is going to rely on the US for its defence is that the US does not really act outside of its own interests. So if Australia is going to rely on the US for its defence, it needs to think about whether it's happy to turn to the US and possibly be told, okay, this war isn't in our own interest. Like, Ambassador, you raised the issue of Somalia and Rwanda earlier, and if you just think about, you know, America's reluctance to intervene in Rwanda after the disaster in Somalia, you can kind of maybe, you know, think about what could happen with Australia if something happens here that's not in US interest.
Thank you.
My name is Donna McIntosh. I think that history should have taught us that great powers will always work in their own best interests, and therefore we can't depend on America or China or anybody working in our best interest. We need to depend on ourselves. I'm with General Molan on this one. We need to think about what our moral issues are, where we want to go, and not make formal alliances with anyone.
Thank you. Your name? Microphone 2.
Hi, I'm a student from Penrith High, and I would like to know, if we as Australia are free riding on America, what is America seeking to gain from our alliance? And a question somebody else wanted to ask is, why are American submarines being allowed to patrol Australia, or something along the lines of.
Why are there Marines
My name
here?
is Timothy Simic from Year 11 from school. I was just asking, with what you're proposing, wanted to clarify, is it really an alliance, or is it more of a factor of reliance? And how would you define the difference between an alliance and a reliance, and what kind of strategies would you have in place to prevent it from turning into reliance?
Okay, is it alliance or reliance? And